So wow, how long have Advance been making the Sigma series? Well, it's 30 years, so it's over 30 years of the Sigma series, and that brings us to the Sigma 11. So there's been quite a few iterations since then, so wow, 30 years. Welcome to the Flybubble Paragliding channel.
We are free flight experts and equipment specialists helping you get the best flying experience. Welcome
to another free Flybubble video. This time we're talking to you about Advance's sports class glider, the Sigma 11. So it's interesting to note that with the Sigma 11, Advance are really promoting the fact that the new design, which they say is a completely new development, it's not an evolution of the Sigma 10, it's a completely new. The main things they're talking about is that it has really good pitch stability and also directional stability, so the glider doesn't move around so much in turbulence. They're saying that not only does that give the glider improved performance in real air and active conditions, but it also, more than anything, it gives you greater stability and comfort. Less tiredness, less active piloting to keep the glider above your head. So who have Advance made the Sigma 11 for? So Advance say the Sigma is intended for experienced and ambitious cross-country pilots who particularly like sporty and lively handling. Advance explained that 3x 3D shaping, reduced line surface area and a swept element to the wing planform are all further performance enhancing features of this high-end XC wing. And also they're promoting the fact that it's actually even lighter than its predecessor, something around half a kilo lighter per size than its predecessor. So the weight optimized internal structure mean that the Sigma 11 is available from only 4 kilos in the smallest size, which is pretty impressive for a standard weight glider, and that's even though the outer wing surface are actually made out of 38 gram material and 32 gram fabric, not like some lightweight gliders that are made out of 27 gram material, which is obviously much thinner and less durable. So first of all, speaking about the build quality, I still feel that Advance build quality is pretty much second to none. The quality is astonishingly good. When you look at all the details, it's just beautiful. Everything looks very beautifully made. All the stitching, everything looks really great and clean. But what's it actually like to fly? That's what we want to know. And to launch, how's the launch? So I've launched the Sigma 11 many times now and ground handled it loads in all kinds of conditions, and I have to say it's an absolute pleasure to launch and kite. One of the nicest gliders ever. I really enjoyed the launch and the kiting on the Sigma 10, but it had a tendency to come up quite fast and sometimes pluck you off the ground if you gave it just a little bit too much pull in stronger conditions. The Sigma 11 is definitely easier to launch, but comes up very nicely and in a very controlled way. It's an absolute dream to launch. For the sports class, it's one of the easier gliders to launch, I feel, one of the less demanding, and actually the pilot demands on launch are quite similar to some other high Bs. And actually in some ways nicer than some of the high Bs. Sigma 11 really communicates to you through the risers and the brakes very, very clearly what's happening. I think also because that sail is so super cohesive and really solid, really tells you what's going on. So it's so easy to just kite on the ground without looking at the glider, even when it's kind of gusty and variable conditions. Our little hills are actually a really good test of how a glider handles and how nimble and agile a glider is, particularly because we're scratching in close to the slope and trying to work little bits of lift, and there's quite often turbulence near the slope and little gusts, and sometimes we have to work very small areas and be very precise to actually stay in the lift. If you go a little bit to that side, you'll just fall out and sink out, and if you go a bit further that way, you'll fall out the other side. So you have to often go into the climb, into the little surges of lift and turn just right precisely on the lift, and be able to turn the glider very precisely but also efficiently. It's no good being able to turn really tight, but you actually bank and roll and lose loads of height. So with Sigma 11, I feel it's absolutely excellent for that. It's because of the real precision in its handling and the fact that it turns very sharp and very immediately when you hit lift, even some quite punchy kind of lift, you can really make the most out of even the trickiest little bits of lift, which I think is great. In fact, it turns that sort of into a real joy, a pleasure. It's kind of a challenge to play around with that. Whereas some other gliders, you'd kind of just be fighting with it to stay in those little bit of lift. The Sigma 11 kind of gives you a feeling of, oh yeah, this is fun, I'm enjoying this. That's another thing about the Sigma 11 that I really like, is the level of feedback for me is like Goldilocks. It's the Goldilocks feeling. It's not too much and it's not too little. In all conditions, from everything from very light scratchy stuff when it's very light and kind of the lift's kind of difficult to feel, I think the Sigma 11 is exceptionally good at finding those weak kind of tricky to find climbs. And at the other end, when it's really sporty and kind of active, because it's very pitch stable and doesn't jump about in the turbulence, it sort of cuts through. That's the feeling you have. It's cutting through the chop, cuts through the crap, cuts through the air nicely, has a tendency to want to keep moving forwards, but without excessively wanting to jump ahead of you either. When it's really choppy and stuff, you do need to fly it a bit actively. It's not completely, well, it's like every paraglider, it does eventually collapse, but it's very collapse resistant. It's very solid, similar to its predecessor, the Sigma 10, possibly even more so. And when you do actually have a collapse, and when I induced some collapses, the glider reacts more benignly than its predecessor. It feels very much like a mid-C for the class in terms of how it behaves in collapses, induced, and when you just let the glider do its thing in some choppy air. It's, yeah, very well behaved for the class. In thermaling, the Sigma 11 is an absolute pleasure. This is a glider that's made for thermaling. The precision and the fact the glider wants to cut into the air, it doesn't hang back, and it wants to bite into the lift, and it communicates to you where the best part of the lift is, what the air is doing around you, without excessively moving around or giving you too much feedback. It means that you feel like you can really make the most out of the thermals. So it's an absolute thermaling dream of a glider. And now let's talk about gliding. So glide angle of the Sigma 11, the glide performance, just from gliding with others, is certainly right up there with the other C-class gliders. Perhaps only now that we have the very high-end C gliders with the first two-liner ENC class gliders that might have a bit more of an edge, especially in accelerated. But the Sigma 11, in terms of its performance on glide, is right up there in the C class. Absolutely excellent glide. When I was pushing out earlier today and it was really quite windy, following through, kind of punching into the air and using the speed system with the rear risers, then I felt the glide was really excellent. Going on to the speed system, so the glide picks up a nice bit of speed. It feels like it's quite quick for the ENC class, one of the quicker ones. Again, with the new ENC two-liners, the top end speed there might be just a little faster. I haven't actually had opportunity to confirm that, it's just a feeling. As you're getting to full bar, the glider still feels pretty solid and stuff, but it starts to get a little bit more nervy and twitchy, as with pretty much all gliders. And there you want to be kind of just flying more actively, especially if it's choppy. You just need to be flying actively on the rear risers and using the pitch control system, the BC system. Let's talk about the BC system. To be honest with the Sigma 11, like quite a few other sports gliders, the BC system is quite physical. It's quite heavy, in fact. So like the Delta 4 and again the Arctic 6 and some others that I'm trying to think of, it's got, the BC system is quite heavy, and it's very smooth and efficient. So when you pull it down, the glider keeps really clean, so that's really nice. And so it's very good for, as you're gliding, say on 3/4 or full bar, and you're using the rear risers to just adjust your angle as you go in and out of different bits of air. That works really well. But if you hit some very sudden turbulence or chop and you want to fly actively, I found that the rear risers, the BC system, like most of the BC systems, is kind of too heavy and stiff to really react to quickly. One thing for me, one criticism I'll give of the Sigma 11, I much prefer personally a lighter BC system that's less physical to use and you can respond to more quickly. For me, for example, The one that stands out on my head is the Fee R07 risers. They're much lighter to use, and because of that, much more usable effectively, and less physical, less tiring, and also you can react and respond to conditions more as well. Having said that, I understand why the manufacturers make the gliders like that with that kind of BC system, because they're trying to keep the B riser, and they're trying to keep the whole system kind of more solid and simple to use. If you've got any questions or any feedback, or if you're a Sigma 11 pilot or are interested in the Sigma 11, then stick a comment down below, get involved in the conversation, share your thoughts. And that's the way that the idea with these videos and what we do is to engage with the community and get to share our experience and share our knowledge with you, so that you can all benefit from that, and we can all try and together to make the free flight community a better, safer place. And so yeah, get involved in the conversation below, speak to us, subscribe to our channel, share the video with others, go and have a look on the Flybubble website, flybubble.com. And I just want to give a big shout out to all our Flybubble customers. Thank you very much for supporting us for all these years.